My name is Nathan. I'm 27, and for as long as I can remember, my family has had a strange way of handling respect. On the outside, we look like the average middle-class family. Sunday dinners at my parents' place, group chats filled with memes and half-hearted happy birthday messages, and a tendency to keep secrets buried under the rug. But behind closed doors, things were different. My dad had this dry humor that often leaned into dismissiveness. My mom had perfected the art of ignoring conflict until it exploded, and my sister, Leah, well, she thrived on control. Leah was 2 years older than me, and she had this uncanny ability to make everyone else feel smaller just so she could feel taller. I had always been the quieter one, more reserved, not one to start drama. Growing up, I learned quickly that standing up to Leah wasn't worth it. She would twist my words, cry in front of our parents, and somehow, I'd be the one apologizing. It created this weird pattern, her pushing boundaries, me swallowing the frustration, and my parents brushing it off as siblings being siblings. But now that we were adults, that dynamic had only grown uglier. Leah had debts she could barely keep up with, a lifestyle she couldn't afford, and a sense of entitlement that made her believe the rest of us should help her out whenever she got in too deep. The breaking point started small, as these things usually do. One afternoon, I was home going through a stack of documents. They weren't anything dramatic on the surface: copies of contracts, agreements, proof of ownership for some of the projects I'd been building quietly over the last few years. To my family, I was still the one figuring things out, the one who didn't quite have a path. They had no idea about the work I'd been putting in behind the scenes, or the deals that were slowly but steadily building my future. I kept it that way on purpose. I wanted something that was mine, free from Leah's manipulations and my dad's dismissive laughter. That day, Leah came over under the pretense of hanging out. Really, she had another motive. I knew because she never came by without one. She cornered me in the kitchen with her usual bright smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Nate, I need you to co-sign a loan for me," she said, as casually as if she were asking me to grab her a drink from the fridge. I looked up from my papers. "What kind of loan?" Her smile faltered just a little, then shifted into that sharp confidence she carried like armor. "Just a small personal loan. Nothing crazy. I'm starting a boutique online, and the bank just needs a co-signer. It'll be quick. Easy." I didn't even let her finish before shaking my head. "No, Leah, I'm not co-signing anything." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're my brother. It's not like I'm asking for money. Just your signature. Which means if you miss payments, I'm on the hook," I said flatly. The silence stretched for a moment. Then she laughed. "You really don't trust me? That's sad, Nate. Family is supposed to help each other." Her words stung in that way only Leah's could. Half guilt trip, half accusation. I went back to sorting my papers, not willing to feed the fire. She lingered, watching me. That's when her eyes flicked to the stack of documents. "What's all this?" she asked, reaching for them. "Nothing you need to worry about," I said quickly, pulling them closer. That only made her more interested. Before I could stop her, she snatched a handful, flipping through them with exaggerated curiosity. "You really keep all this junk?" she said with a mocking laugh. Then, in one swift motion, she walked over to the shredder I kept in the corner of my office space. "Leah, don't." But she was already feeding the first page in, smiling like she was performing some kind of victory. "Why bother keeping these? It's not like you'll ever amount to anything," she said sweetly, as the paper disappeared into strips. I felt the words hit me harder than the act itself. She didn't know what she was destroying. She didn't know the weight of those documents, proof of investments, ownership stakes, plans I had poured years into. She didn't know because she never cared to. To her, I was still the little brother who could be belittled and brushed aside. Before I could say anything, my dad, who had been watching from the living room, chuckled. "She's just joking, Nate. Don't get all serious." I looked at him, then at Leah, who was smirking like she had won something. My chest burned, but I didn't say a word. I gathered what remained of my papers, stacked them neatly, and put them away. That evening, I sat alone in my room staring at what was left. My head was buzzing, not just with anger, but with something sharper, colder. I realized then that arguing wouldn't change anything. They would never see me for who I really was. They only saw the version of me they had constructed years ago, the quiet, unambitious, younger brother who would always be easy to dismiss. So I stayed silent. I smiled at dinner. I nodded when Leah made her usual backhanded comments. But later that night, as the clock ticked toward midnight, I made a few calls. I signed a few papers, and I set things in motion that none of them could see coming. By 7:02 the next morning, Leah's phone was buzzing with news she never expected. And well, that was only the beginning. The next morning started off with the usual chaos that came with being around my family, except this time, there was something different in the air. I could feel it even before I walked into the kitchen. Leah was already on the phone, her voice sharp and shrill, words spilling out in fragments I couldn't piece together just yet. She was pacing back and forth, clutching her coffee mug in one hand, her phone pressed tight against her ear in the other. When she noticed me, she narrowed her eyes as though my very presence was an inconvenience. "Don't look so smug, Nate," she snapped, covering the receiver for a second. "I know you had something to do with this." I blinked, genuinely curious. "What are you talking about?" But she didn't answer me. She just turned her back, muttering furiously into her phone again. Dad wandered in a moment later, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on now?" he asked with a groggy yawn. Leah shoved her phone into her pocket and shot me a glare so cold it nearly froze me in place. "Apparently, some of my accounts are frozen. I don't know what's happening, but it better not be you." I tilted my head. "Why would it be me?" Dad chuckled like this was some sort of sibling prank. "You two need to stop acting like enemies. Leah's probably just having some banking issue. Don't overthink it." He clapped me on the shoulder and went to make his coffee, not even noticing the tension buzzing between us. That's when I knew. If Leah suspected me, it was only because she was scared. And if she was scared, it meant the walls she had built around her perfect facade were starting to crack. But rather than pressing her further, I let it go. I let her stew in that paranoia, because I knew it would eat at her far more than anything I could say. The rest of the week unfolded in ways that only highlighted how deep the favoritism ran in our family. Every time Leah raised her voice, every time she made some sharp comment in my direction, my parents dismissed it with the same tired phrases. "She's just stressed. She doesn't mean it. You know how she gets." It was the same pattern I'd endured for years, but now, it was amplified by Leah's growing sense of desperation. One evening, we were all sitting in the living room. Leah had just finished telling Mom and Dad about her big plans for the boutique, despite the fact that she had no products, no business plan, and no money to fund it. She talked with the confidence of someone who believed the universe owed her success just because she wanted it badly enough. Dad leaned back in his chair, nodding. "That's my girl. Always thinking big." Mom smiled warmly. "Leah's got ambition. She'll figure it out." And then, almost like an afterthought, Dad glanced at me. "Nathan, maybe you could help her. You're good with computers and whatever it is you do. Why don't you give her a hand setting it all up?" Leah smirked, clearly enjoying this. "Yeah, Nate, you can build me a website. It's not like you're doing anything important." That was the moment I realized just how invisible I still was to them. My parents had no clue what I'd been working on, what I had accomplished, what I had lined up for the future. And Leah certainly didn't care. She only saw me as a tool to be used, someone who should fall in line with her needs. I forced a smile. "I'm busy with my own projects." Leah rolled her eyes. "Projects," she said mockingly, drawing the word out as if it were a joke. "Please, if you had anything worth showing, you would have done it by now. Stop pretending like you're too important to help your family." Mom frowned at me, her tone sharp in a way it never was with Leah. "Don't be difficult, Nathan. It wouldn't hurt you to lend a hand." Something twisted in my chest at that moment. It wasn't just the favoritism, it was the utter dismissal of my boundaries, my work, my worth. I stayed quiet, because I knew arguing wouldn't change anything. Instead, I excused myself and went upstairs, letting their words echo behind me. But Leah wasn't done. Not even close. A few days later, I came home to find my desk drawers open, papers scattered across the floor. Leah was sitting in my chair, rifling through what was left of my documents. "What are you doing?" I asked sharply, stepping forward. She looked up, unbothered. "Relax. I'm just checking if you're hiding money from us. You're not dumb enough to keep anything important here, are you?" The audacity of it made my blood run hot. "You can't just go through my things." She leaned back in the chair, crossing her legs. "You live in Mom and Dad's house. Nothing here is just yours. Don't act like you're above the rest of us." I stared at her, and for a split second, I almost let my anger spill over. But then I caught myself. "No, If I exploded now, she'd win. She'd cry to mom and dad, and they'd scold me for overreacting. It was a script I knew by heart. So instead, I bent down, calmly gathered my papers, and stacked them neatly back into the drawer. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You'll regret this one day." She laughed, loud and mocking. "What? Are you going to curse me or something? Grow up, Nate. You're not scary. You're pathetic." That word stuck with me long after she left my room. Pathetic. It was the word she had always used when she wanted to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt something shift. I wasn't the same kid who used to swallow those insults whole. I wasn't the brother who let her get away with everything. And though Leah didn't know it yet, the ground beneath her was already starting to move. It happened 2 weeks later. By then, Leah's mood had shifted into something sharper, more unpredictable. She was constantly on edge, snapping at small inconveniences, pacing around the house late at night, making calls she thought no one could hear. Every so often, I'd catch fragments, arguments with banks, overdue balances, a credit card maxed out. She'd slam the phone down and storm into her room, pretending everything was under control when it so obviously wasn't. What I didn't know then, but would find out in the worst possible way, was that Leah was already plotting something reckless. It started on a Friday afternoon. I had just gotten back from a meeting in town, quiet, low profile, the kind of thing I never told my family about. The house was unusually quiet, which was rare for Leah. Normally, she made her presence known the second I walked through the door. But that day, nothing. I thought maybe she had gone out. When I stepped into my room, though, my stomach dropped. My desk drawers weren't just open this time, they were empty. The small safe I kept tucked behind a row of books on the shelf was gone, leaving behind a scuffed patch on the floor. Papers, contracts, receipts, all of it stripped bare. I froze in the doorway, my hands tightening around the strap of my bag. For a second, I thought maybe I had misplaced things, maybe I was overreacting. But the hollow space where the safe had been told me otherwise. "Nate." Leah's voice floated up the stairs, sweet and sing-song. I turned, and there she was, standing in the hall with that smug smile plastered across her face. She was holding something in her hand, my safe key, dangling from her fingers like a prize. "What did you do?" My voice came out low, tight. She sauntered closer, twirling the key before tossing it casually onto my bed. "Relax. I borrowed a few things. You'll thank me later." My chest constricted. Borrowed what exactly? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted her head, pretending to think. "Some of those contracts you hide. A few of your account details. Honestly, you should be grateful I'm smarter than you. You just leave this stuff lying around like it's worthless." "Leah," my voice cracked sharper now, but she cut me off. "I used your name," she said, almost proudly. "Got approved for a loan this morning. 30 grand. It's already in my account." The room spun. My pulse roared in my ears. "You what?" She shrugged, like it was nothing. "Don't act so shocked. You wouldn't help me, so I helped myself. And before you start whining, I'll pay it back. Eventually. No harm done. No harm done." Those 3 words lit a fire in my chest. $30,000 attached to my name, my record, my future. Years of carefully protecting what I was building. Years of making sure no one could tie me down with their recklessness. And she had undone it in a single selfish act. "You had no right," I whispered, my voice trembling, not with weakness but with rage I could barely contain. Leah smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "You act like you're some big shot, Nate, but you're not. You're still the little brother living under mom and dad's roof, pretending you're too good for us. Well, guess what? You're not. You'll always be second best, and now you finally get to be useful." I wanted to scream, to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she understood the weight of what she'd done. But I didn't. I stood there, fists clenched so tight my nails dug crescents into my palms, forcing myself to breathe. Because in that moment, I realized something important. Leah didn't fear me. She didn't respect me. She thought she had total control, that she could take, destroy, and manipulate without consequence. And my parents, if I told them, would laugh it off like always. That was the moment the trust, already hanging by a thread, snapped completely. Later that evening, at dinner, Leah bragged openly about her new opportunity. She described the boutique she planned to launch, how the money was already secured, how she was finally on her way to success. Mom beamed at her like she was the golden child. "That's wonderful, Leah. We knew you'd figure something out." Dad raised his glass. To Leah, always ambitious. And then, as if to twist the knife deeper, Leah glanced at me with that sly smirk. And to Nate, for being so supportive. They all laughed, clinking glasses. Nobody noticed how silent I was, how my jaw tightened, how I didn't so much as touch my food. Inside, I was already breaking away from them, piece by piece. Because Leah had made one thing clear. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And whether she knew it or not, the clock had already started ticking. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of Leah's voice through the wall as she spoke excitedly on the phone to one of her friends. Every few minutes, she laughed, the kind of laugh that made my skin crawl, because I knew exactly what it meant. She was celebrating. She had stolen from me, dragged my name through the mud, and she was sitting there acting like she had won some great victory. The anger burned so hot in me that it almost felt hollow, like my body couldn't contain it anymore. I kept running the numbers in my head, the paperwork I'd lost, the calls I'd have to make come Monday morning. Leah had no idea what she'd done. Those documents weren't just scraps of paper. They were proof of contracts, investments, deals that I had worked years to cultivate. Some of them weren't even replaceable without weeks of headaches and legal procedures. But what ate at me more than the documents was the loan. $30,000. In my name. My record. My credit. My responsibility if she defaulted. Which, knowing Leah, was almost inevitable. I thought about how fragile credit was, how one mistake could blacklist me from future opportunities, how one selfish act from her could slam doors I had worked quietly and carefully to open. The next morning, I tried to talk to my parents. I sat across from them at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the blinds, illuminating the steam curling up from their coffee mugs. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice low but firm. "Leah used my identity to take out a loan." Dad chuckled before I could even finish. "Nathan, don't exaggerate. She probably just put you down as a reference." I shook my head, frustration tightening my throat. "No, she took my documents. She used my name. The loan is in my record." Mom's frown deepened, but not in the way I'd hoped. It wasn't concern, it was disappointment directed at me. "Why would you let her do that? If you didn't want to be involved, you should have kept better track of your things." For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. The blame wasn't on Leah, who had stolen from me, lied, and jeopardized everything I'd built. It was on me, for not keeping better track of my life. Leah walked into the kitchen just then, yawning dramatically as if she had just rolled out of the most peaceful sleep in the world. "Are we still on this?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Nate, you worry too much. Everything's fine. I'll pay it back before it even matters." I stared at her, waiting for my parents to say something, anything, to call her out. But Dad just clapped her on the shoulder and said, "That's my girl. Always resourceful." I don't remember leaving the table, only that suddenly I was back in my room with the door locked, my chest heaving like I had run miles. I'd always known my family played favorites, but I had never felt it this sharp before. I wasn't just overlooked, I was expendable. My future, my security, my work, they were all secondary to Leah's whims. The days that followed were some of the hardest I'd lived. Leah strutted around the house, making calls about suppliers, bragging about her plans, already spending the money she hadn't earned. Every time I saw her smile, it twisted something inside me. I started avoiding the family altogether, eating meals alone, keeping my door locked at all times. At night, though, the reality hit me hardest. I'd sit in front of my laptop, scrolling through account balances, calling contacts discreetly, trying to piece together how much damage she had done. Some of the contractors I'd worked with were suddenly hesitant, their voices tight as they mentioned inconsistencies with recent paperwork. I felt a cold pit in my stomach as I realized Leah's recklessness wasn't just personal, it was professional. That was my rock bottom. Sitting alone at 2 a.m., staring at an email chain where one of my most promising deals had been put on hold pending verification, because Leah's theft had raised red flags. But as heavy as the despair felt, a strange clarity began to form underneath it. I realized something important. Leah had always underestimated me, and my parents had always enabled her because I let them. I had swallowed every insult, every dismissal, every betrayal. And what had it earned me? Nothing but pain. So I made a decision that night. Not an impulsive one, not a loud one. A quiet, steady decision that I let settle deep in my bones. I was done playing the role they wrote for me. The next morning, I packed a small bag. Just essentials. Laptop, charger, a few clothes. I didn't announce it. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out while they were eating breakfast, their laughter muffled through the kitchen walls. I drove across town to a small apartment I had been renting in secret for months. A place I'd barely used, intended originally as a workspace, but now, suddenly, it felt like a sanctuary. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without my chest aching. From there, I started to rebuild. I made calls to my contacts, quietly explaining what had happened, assuring them I was handling it. I began speaking with a lawyer, discreetly, carefully. Every conversation felt like another brick in the foundation of something new, something stronger. Leah thought she had broken me. My parents thought I would bend like always. But rock bottom had given me something they hadn't expected, clarity. And slowly, methodically, I began to plan. The first few weeks in that apartment felt surreal, almost like I was living two lives. In one, I was still the Nathan my family knew, the one who could be mocked, dismissed, and used without consequence. In the other, I was finally free. The silence of my new place didn't feel empty. It felt like possibility. Every morning I woke up and reminded myself. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know what I was doing. And for the first time, I liked it that way. I started with damage control. My lawyer, an older man named Richard who spoke with a calm patience I hadn't experienced in a long time, walked me through each step. Identity theft, fraud, contract interference. Words that made my stomach twist, but also fueled me with a sense of direction. You've got a case, he told me, but it'll take time. Meanwhile, protect your assets. Lock down everything you can. So I did. I changed passwords, shifted accounts, reissued documents, and placed holds where necessary. Every click of the mouse felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that Leah had tried to steal. Work, surprisingly, didn't collapse under the weight of her betrayal. A few partners had been spooked, yes, but once I explained, carefully and professionally, most of them came back on board. In fact, one investor seemed impressed by how I handled the mess. If you can manage family sabotage, he said over the phone, you can manage anything. It wasn't the compliment I'd expected, but I took it. Money, too, began to shift in my favor. A contract I had been nurturing for over a year finally closed. The deposit hit my account like a thunderclap, more money than Leah had stolen, more than I'd ever seen land in one go. I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the numbers, a slow smile spreading across my face. And it didn't stop there. With the new funds, I expanded. I brought on a partner to handle logistics, freeing me to focus on growth. I upgraded my workspace. Calls started coming in, not from me chasing others, but from people seeking me out. My name, my real name, the one Leah had tried to tarnish, was starting to carry weight. I also invested in myself. Gym memberships had always felt like a waste before, but now I craved structure. Early mornings became routine, weights, running, pushing my body the way I was pushing my career. Each drop of sweat felt like shedding another layer of the old Nathan, the one who swallowed his anger in silence. Socially, too, things shifted. I found myself reconnecting with old friends Leah had driven away years ago with her antics. People I hadn't seen since college suddenly became interested in collaborating, catching up, grabbing coffee. I didn't tell them everything, but enough to let them know I was moving forward. The strangest part? For the first time in years, I felt happy. Not euphoric, not some cinematic transformation. Just steady, quiet happiness. I'd walk back to my apartment after meetings, grocery bag in one hand, and realize I wasn't dreading the evening. I wasn't bracing for Leah's comments or my dad's laughter at my expense. I was living on my own terms. Meanwhile, my family had no idea. Calls from my mom went unanswered, texts from Leah ignored. I knew they were wondering, maybe even worried, but I didn't give them answers. I wanted them to sit with that silence, to feel the absence they'd never acknowledged before. But despite the progress, I never forgot the wound. Every success was a reminder of what Leah had tried to take from me. Every laugh with a client, every new opportunity, it all circled back to her betrayal. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about rising above. It wasn't enough to rebuild quietly in the shadows. One evening, sitting in my office with the city lights blinking outside the window, Richard leaned back in his chair during one of our meetings and said, "You're doing well, Nathan. But you know, cases like this, when it's family, it's not just about the legal outcome. It's about closure. What do you want from all this?" I didn't answer right away. But later that night, lying in bed, I realized what I wanted. I didn't want Leah in jail, not necessarily. I didn't want to scream at my parents until they admitted they were wrong. What I wanted was something deeper. I wanted them to see me, to finally understand the weight of what they had dismissed, to feel the consequences of years of favoritism and betrayal. And for the first time, I had the means to make that happen. The rise wasn't just about money or success. It was about power. And slowly, piece by piece, I was stepping into it. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning, the kind that started ordinary but ended with my entire outlook shifting. I was at my apartment, sipping coffee while reviewing some contracts, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Hello, is this Nathan Cole?" a crisp voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is Julia Harper. I'm with Brightline Financial. We're reaching out regarding a loan issued in your name last month." My grip on the mug tightened. "Leah, of course," but I forced my voice calm. "Yes, I'm aware of some irregularities. What's the issue?" There was a pause. Then Julia lowered her tone slightly, as though choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Cole, the loan in question has already been flagged for suspicious activity. Payments haven't been made. The account linked to it is under investigation for misuse of funds. Before this escalates, I'd like to confirm, did you personally authorize this loan?" It was exactly what I'd been waiting for. "No," I said firmly. "I did not authorize it. My identity was used without my consent. I have a lawyer already working on this." Julia exhaled, relieved almost. "Thank you. That's all I needed to hear. In that case, Mr. Cole, we'll shift the liability away from you and open a fraud file. But you may want to know, the account tied to the loan has already been drained. Whoever did this moved fast." I hung up with my pulse racing. Leah hadn't just stolen my name. She'd burned through $30,000 in less than a month. Whatever she was doing with it, flashy spending, fake business expenses, it was collapsing. That call gave me something I hadn't had before: leverage. Proof. Hard evidence that what she did wasn't just a family squabble, but fraud on record. My lawyer would have no trouble building a case now. But the real opportunity came later that week. I was meeting with a new client, a mid-sized firm interested in contracting my services. The meeting went better than expected, and as we wrapped up, the CEO, a sharp-eyed woman named Melissa, asked, "Have you ever considered taking on larger-scale projects? Partnerships with institutions rather than individuals?" I admitted I hadn't thought much about it, but she smiled. "You should. People in my network are always looking for someone reliable, discreet, and innovative. You've got the profile. If you're interested, I'll make introductions." That was the moment I realized just how far I'd come. Months ago, I was begging people to give me a chance. Now, doors were opening without me knocking. And if I played this right, I could establish myself in a space Leah and my parents couldn't even dream of. So I leaned in. I built connections. I attended events where people actually respected me, where my last name didn't define me. I started dressing differently, tailored suits instead of hoodies. I carried myself differently too, shoulders squared, voice steady. It wasn't an act anymore. It was who I was becoming. And yet, I kept my family in the dark. To them, I was still absent, still the quiet son who hadn't bothered to show his face. Every so often, Mom would text me, "When are you coming home? Leah's been under so much stress. She could use your support." Or Dad would send a half-hearted message, "You've made your point. Don't drag this out." Family forgives. But forgiveness was never what they'd given me. And support was never what Leah had shown me. One evening, I scrolled through social media and stumbled upon Leah's latest post. A glossy photo of her in front of a storefront with a banner reading, "Grand opening soon, Luxline Boutique." She was grinning, posing as if she'd built an empire from scratch. The caption read, "Dreams don't work unless you do." Excited for this new chapter. The irony nearly made me laugh. She hadn't worked for this. She'd stolen. She'd risked everything on a foundation made of lies. And now, she was broadcasting it for the world to see. That was when the idea hit me. Not just to let her fail quietly, but to make sure her downfall was undeniable. Public. Because Leah's greatest strength wasn't her ambition. It was her image. She thrived on perception, on people believing she was unstoppable. If that image shattered, if the world saw her for what she really was, it would cut deeper than any lecture or scolding ever could. The setup was already unfolding. I had the evidence, the growing influence, and a rising reputation in circles Leah didn't even know existed. All I needed now was the right moment to bring it together. And that moment, I felt certain, was coming soon. The revenge didn't begin with fireworks. It began with a quiet email. Richard, my lawyer, had helped me organize everything. Evidence of the loan fraud, proof of identity theft, even screenshots of Leah's posts flaunting her so-called boutique. Together, we prepared a neat little package and submitted it to Brightline Financial, the bank, and, more importantly, to the proper fraud investigators. I wasn't reckless. I didn't want to destroy her overnight and risk getting caught in the fallout. No, this had to be precise, controlled, undeniable. The first domino fell the week before her boutique's grand opening. Leah had been plastering invitations across social media, tagging friends, hyping it up like she was about to launch the next Prada. Meanwhile, her suppliers, whom she hadn't actually paid, were starting to make noise. It started with whispers. I heard from a contact in logistics that one of Leah's shipments had been held back due to payment inconsistencies. Another supplier pulled out entirely. Word spread fast in the small business community, and soon, her name was circulating not as a rising entrepreneur, but as a liability. I didn't interfere with that part. Leah had dug that hole herself. I just gave the shovel a little nudge. The real strike came at the event itself. Leah had rented a local hall, draped it in cheap fabric to look luxurious, and invited anyone who would listen. Mom and Dad were there, of course, standing proudly at her side. My dad wore his best suit. Mom fussed over the decorations, both of them beaming as if Leah's success was their own. I wasn't planning on attending, at least not in the way they expected, but I made sure I was present in another form. That morning, at exactly 7:02 a.m., Brightline Financial released a statement to Leah's email, phone, and, thanks to an automated setting, her business website. It was clinical, sterile, but devastating. Confirmation that the loan under her account had been flagged as fraudulent, that further investigation was underway, and that her assets tied to it had been frozen effective immediately. By the time guests were arriving, Leah's card machines weren't processing payments. Her bank apps wouldn't log in. Her boutique stock had already been clawed back by suppliers. I heard later from someone who attended that Leah tried to laugh it off at first. Just a technical issue. Guys, don't worry, we'll be back up in a minute. But when the murmurs began, when people started checking their own phones and seeing the public notices about Luxline Boutique being under investigation for financial fraud, the laughter stopped. My parents, of course, tried to salvage the situation. Dad shouted at the staff, demanding answers. Mom scolded guests for spreading lies. But the truth was already in the air, undeniable. And Leah? She crumbled. Her carefully curated image shattered in real time, the smirk gone, replaced by panic she couldn't disguise. Meanwhile, I was across town, sitting in a cafe, sipping my coffee. My phone buzzed with updates from Richard. Confirmation that liability had been lifted from my name. Confirmation that Leah was now fully accountable. Confirmation that authorities had begun reviewing her accounts. Each ping was another weight lifted from my shoulders. And then came the messages. First from Mom. Nathan, where are you? Leah is in trouble. You need to come here and explain what's going on. Then from Dad. If you did this, you've gone too far. She's your sister. Family is supposed to protect each other. And finally, from Leah herself. A single, frantic message. You'll regret this. I set my phone down, watching the steam curl from my cup. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel silenced. I felt steady, calm. Because revenge, I realized, wasn't about shouting or screaming. It was about letting truth do the work for you. Leah had built her empire on lies, and all I'd done was give those lies a mirror. And now, as the cracks widened, I knew the fallout was only just beginning. The fallout came faster than even I expected. Within days of the boutique's implosion, Leah's name was on every local business forum and group chat. Suppliers posted warnings about her unpaid bills. A screenshot of Brightline's fraud notice leaked on his social media, spreading like wildfire. What was supposed to be her triumphant new chapter became a cautionary tale. People who once flattered her online now kept their distance, eager not to be associated with her downfall. At home, the situation turned volatile. Mom called me every day, her voice shaking between anger and desperation. "Nathan, she's your sister. You can't let them do this to her." "Mom," I said calmly, "I didn't do this to her. She did this to herself. And if you can't see that, then you've chosen your side." Dad tried the tougher approach. He left me a voicemail, his tone sharp and disappointed. "You've embarrassed this family. You think you've won something, but all you've done is tear us apart." But for once, their words didn't pierce me. I didn't feel the old guilt or the familiar urge to defend myself. I felt free. Leah, on the other hand, was unraveling. I heard from an old mutual friend that she had broken down crying at a cafe, ranting about how everyone had betrayed her. The same friend told me she was drowning in calls from creditors, her phone buzzing so relentlessly she stopped answering altogether. The $30,000 loan wasn't the only one. She'd layered debt on debt, each one more reckless than the last. With her accounts frozen, she couldn't juggle them anymore. My lawyer, Richard, assured me that legally, I was in the clear. The fraud case had been documented thoroughly, my name removed from liability. Leah, however, was now under official investigation. She wasn't going to prison, not yet, but the weight of financial ruin was hers to bear alone. A month later, my parents tried one last time to pull me back. They invited me over for dinner. Against my better judgment, I went. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to see it, needed to face them on my terms. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Leah sat at the table, her hair unkempt, dark circles under her eyes. She didn't look like the confident, smug sister I had grown up with. She looked defeated. When our eyes met, she didn't say a word, just glared, as if words were beneath her now. Mom fussed with the plates, her voice brittle. "Nathan, we're still family. Mistakes were made, but family forgives." I let the silence stretch before answering. Mistakes are forgetting a birthday or being late to dinner. Fraud isn't a mistake. Betrayal isn't a mistake. And you didn't just forgive her, you enabled her. Dad leaned forward, his jaw tight. "So what? You're just going to cut us off? Pretend we don't exist?" I met his stare, steady and calm. "I'm not pretending. I'm choosing." The room fell silent. Leah finally scoffed, shaking her head. "You think you're better than us now, don't you?" I stood, pushing back my chair. "No, Leah. I just know my worth now. And that's something you'll never take from me again." Without another word, I walked out. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, the city lights stretched out before me, glowing against the dark. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from my family. I was moving forward, finally free of their shadows. Leah would face the consequences of her choices. My parents would wrestle with the silence they had helped create. And me? I was no longer the quiet, expendable brother. I was Nathan Cole, standing on my own name, my own work, my own future. The last message I ever received from my mom came a week later. Just 4 words: "We need you home." I read it once, then deleted it. Because the truth was, I was already home.